true source when we feel like it. If you need to get your news from social media, we are here for you. GDN Network, your news, our story, whenever.
GDN Network Podcast. I'm Sean Carpenter, your host, and here is your news at the top of the hour. Here we are once again, and we're coming upon another Washingtonian crisis. Every major media outlet is reporting on another fight between the Democrats and the Republicans in Washington. Why is this happening? Because they think that's what you want. But first, let's take a look at a few things that revolve around this crisis. Number one, we're going to look at the history of the problem. Number two, we're going to look at the current fiscal problem. Number three, we're going to talk about a buzzword that everybody's been yammering on about all week long, and that's the American people. So the history of this problem is actually quite interesting. The U.S. national debt is not a new concept. Prior to even the formation and the acceptance of the U.S. Constitution in 1789, the U.S. was borrowing money. In fact, a group looking to fund the war with England was responsible for seeking some money from France and the Netherlands. And in fact, in recent years, the issue has become so much of a political football that minority parties, those that aren't in power, are looking to claim the opposite side's leaders are spending beyond their means. It's a classic household argument that so many people get, but also one that many people can relate. A little debt can't hurt you, right? If so, how many of us would not be in our own home? I mean, let's think about this. We actually own our home, or our homes that were bought with borrowed money and backed by the U.S. government that's already in bigger debt. So that's the history of the problem. Well, let's take a look at the current problem. Today's day and age, everything changes so quickly. As we wait for the storm to move by, we hope that we can catch up with something. We may not want to work hard, but we know what we want. We know what our future looks like. Dedication to learning and working hard. So many people want to earn a living in real estate today. If it were always easy, everyone would be doing it. We make it informative, useful, interesting, and most of all, fun. We are Global Deal Fund, your real estate advisory services firm, dedicated to meeting your goals. In the current fiscal problem, I really think that this problem stems from a statement made by the Senate Minority Leader way back in 2010. It set the tone of animosity in Washington. Certainly other statements had been played out on both sides. I mean, this isn't a partisan thing, but none more than Mitch McConnell and his decision to politically wipe out the president. Let's take a listen here.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
This essentially led to a showdown in the summer of 2011 where the minority party blocked a fairly regular process of extending the debt ceiling. And this tactic has been used before, mostly through the budgeting process and what they call continuing resolutions. This too was looking to shut down the government, to force a tax increase, and essentially cripple an already injured country economically into a very new economic crisis. So what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Congress reached a compromise, and they kicked the problem to November 2011 by creating a super committee. A super committee is no different from any other committee in Congress, but it really has just more of a marketable name and acts as a self-serving moniker for its members. But so goes in Washington. Guess what happened? The committee barely met. They held a few hearings, reported very little, and essentially failed on its promise to carry out its duties. And because of this, automatic cuts would come about in January of 2013. So, Congress has an additional year to make this right and stop the destructive budgetary eliminations from happening. Coupled with the fact that it was also an election year, which would ultimately get members of Congress in their home districts, and they would hear about how these cuts in funding would affect their constituents. Ultimately, the new looming cuts became known as the fiscal cliff. It was featured all throughout the presidential election. Obama blamed the Republicans, Romney blamed everyone, but in reality, the conversation was ignored in favor of other global issues that were caricaturized by the candidates. So ultimately, Obama gets elected, and the focus of the national media turns to the fiscal cliff. Armageddon is about to strike the country. The economy is going to go deep into a recession. The world is going to collapse economically, and nobody's going to be able to do anything. The fiscal cliff will be complete and utter pandemonium. CNBC even created a campaign dedicated to this whole issue and tried to encourage Congress to come back to work from yet another vacation and strike an agreement. But it was getting late. This might mean that they have to be in Washington during New Year's Eve. Oh no. Well, the fiscal cliff was over when the House voted to concur with the Senate on January 1st and agreed to a compromise that would push this issue just a short time down the road, another 2 months, where they could work out some of the details. There was a tax increase for the richest sector of folks. There was some spending cuts. By the way, in that fiscal cliff vote, there was also a bunch of pork, and there was a bunch of Sandy relief came a couple of days later, with $30 billion not being spent on Sandy relief efforts was actually a part of that bill. But that's for another day. There were all kinds of speeches actually at this point in January saying that members of Congress were going to make this a priority and make sure that there would be no new issues. But right after this happened, the president and Congress left for another vacation. And everyone forgot about this, and once again, the crisis came to a new deadline. And this new deadline has now been given the name sequestration. And, you know, like when you're in a high-profile jury for a murder trial or whatever. The fact of the matter is, sequestration talks about the automatic cuts in the budget that happen across the board in order to balance or reduce the deficit in the next 20 years. So in just a day from now, just a few short hours, here are some of the automatic cuts that will come about as a reason for this crisis. Here's some of the things that you've been hearing being talked about. Here's some of the things that are going to happen on March 1st or tomorrow. But they're really not going to happen tomorrow because it's really 30 days out, and by that 30 days maybe some people will meet. So really, is there an issue? I don't know. But according to globestreet.com, over $2.5 billion in defense construction spending will be cut. $194 million in HUD community development funds dedicated to affordable housing development will be cut. According to the White House, which put a report out and a website out about this, and from businessinsider.com, more cuts includes cuts to nutrition programs and homelessness programs and mental health programs. These are three areas that are always hot button issues. Why put homeless people in housing? Why feed people who don't have food? Why help people who don't have certain stability issues? Well, because people don't realize it. If you're so-called normal, you don't care about these things. But these things are a huge piece of the economy today. Keep people off the street and committing crimes because they have another reason to live. Meals on Wheels will face significant cuts. Unemployment compensation. Head Start. 125,000 housing choice vouchers from Section 8. Cut. The Federal Drug Administration, or the Food and Drug Administration, will have significant cuts in food inspection, things like that. The Agricultural will have Department of Agriculture will have cuts. My favorite is FAA. The FAA will be cutting or furloughing folks, which is going to cause delays in flights. The TSA, the guys at the airport who are looking at you naked when you go through the screeners, they're going to see significant cuts in their operations, which will make it longer for you to get through the airport when you're going away somewhere. Multiple reports are also indicating that the National Weather Service, through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, will also be cutting their budgets, which may give significant delay in us learning about pending storms that may or may not be hitting us. And we really know what the record is of most meteorology reports anyway. And I'm going to share with you one right here.
Alright, things have gotten really bad out here. We're reporting live from the shelter, and things are really bad. I have to have these makeshift umbrellas that can help us, report to you. I mean, as you can see, there's a sea of white behind me. I was going to bring to you live here Dr. Kelvin Dinsmore, who's right here, a famous seismologist. He's predicting a tsunami will hit us in the next day or so.
That's seismologist, Sean. Yes, I am Kelvin Dinsmore. Dr. Kelvin Anderson Dinsmore.
We don't even know what's going to happen, but we've got these makeshift umbrellas.
Noted seismologist.
Oh, there's people flying everywhere. But the shelter is fine, so come on down to the shelter right now. 2-for-1 specials.
Look for less people at the FBI. Maybe less people working at the Bureau of Prisons. Both of those areas, I don't know anybody, so we'll see how that happens. That'll have to happen. The scare site at the White House has also indicated that we will get more wildfires as a result of these sequestration cuts. Oh, and remember Benghazi, which was a political football on both sides last year when diplomats serving overseas were bombed, and this has been just argued, and really Benghazi has just become a buzzword. Well, guess what sequestration will do? It will also cut the security in those buildings overseas. Even today, the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has indicated that Congress going out on junkets will no longer be able to use military planes. What a travesty we are seeing out there. What an absolute travesty. This is some scary stuff. There's only one problem, is it's just another crisis in Washington. Most people don't even believe that these cuts will happen. Further, multiple polls are suggesting that people actually agree with a good amount of the cuts that are being made, particularly in foreign aid, while a majority oppose cuts to housing, transportation, environmental, educational, healthcare, and Social Security. So it's become a hot button issue. And what's happened is that folks in Washington are using it and abusing it by scaring people off. I just heard a report where the Attorney General of the United States indicated that our security, the national security, would be lessened as a result of this. If that was actually true, I don't think he would be advertising it, quite honestly. But we're all being used as a pawn. And I love when I hear the American people don't want this. The American people this, the American people that. It's all we hear from everybody, from Democrats to Republicans to Libertarians to Nonitarians to Vegetarians to Vegans. Do the American people care about this issue? Do the American people blame Congress or the President? Do either Congress or the President have a favorable opinion rating? The reality is that we are the American people, and we have taken our eye off the prize. We continuously elect people back into office despite widespread failures to carry out basic responsibilities. The last budget was passed in 2009. We don't even hold our public servants accountable, but rather evoke celebrity status in them. We allow them to capitalize on national tragedies to further their own agendas, to get their mugs on television, while the economy continues to tank. We allow them to throw more gas taxes on us when gas prices are rising because of false commodities trading. We allow corporations to continue to take subsidies from the government while passing off additional costs to the consumer. We allow for bills like Sandy relief, tugging at the heartstrings of American people all over the country, to include $30 billion worth of pork. I guess we are the American people, and we asked for it. For GDN Networks, I'm Sean Carpenter. Back to you.